Hello and welcome back to this video series. We are going to be looking at the 10 most repeated topics in biology UTME. It's very important for us to note that every single topic in the JAM syllabus is important. Every one of them is important. But what you should know very well that these topics are topics that you should pay special attention to. You should know very well because the likelihood of them appearing in every UTME exam is very high. So we are going to be looking at the 10th topic, and the 10th topic here is humans and environment. This tells us how humans affect their environment and vice versa. And under this topic, we're going to be looking at subtopics. So one of the first subtopic here is going to be diseases. And under diseases, we should know common and endemic diseases. These are diseases that usually occur within a particular region. It's not worldwide. It can occur in places that are particular to like a region. It can occur in a particular region. Let's say, for instance, you have poliomyelitis endemic in northern Nigeria. So these are diseases that are endemic, that are particular to a place. It's not widespread. So we have common and endemic diseases, and we have easily transmissible diseases. Some of these diseases that can easily be transmitted from person to person, from person to person, or through droplet infections and all. Example of such diseases, we have poliomyelitis, which is caused by the polio virus. We have cholera, which is caused by Vibrio cholerae. We have tuberculosis, which is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. We have STDs, which are usually transmitted, sexually transmitted diseases. And example of such, we have gonorrhea, which is caused by Neisseria gonorrhea. We have syphilis, which is caused by Treponema pallidum. We have AIDS, which is caused by the virus HIV, and there are so many other sexually transmitted diseases like herpes virus and chlamydia. There are a lot. Moving on from diseases, another subtopic for you to note very well is pollution and control. This is the contamination of environment with harmful substances, and what you should know very well is the sources of this pollution, the types of pollution, the effects that this pollution have on the environment and on humans, and the methods that you can carry out, the methods that measures that you can take to actually control this pollution. Moving on from this, we are going to be looking at another subtopic, conservation of natural resources. How do humans conserve natural resources that has been provided by nature? How are these resources conserved? Another subtopic we're going to be looking at under the humans and environment is game reserves and national park. We have in Nigeria, there are so many game reserves, there are so many national parks. We have Obudukati Ranch and the likes of it. So it's very important for you to note these things, humans and environment. So moving on from this, we are going to be looking at the 9th most important topic, or the 9th most repeated topic in biology UTME, which is soil. Soil is the uppermost layer of the earth's crust, which supports plant growth and is a habitat for some organisms. We have so many organisms living in the soil, and plants basically grow on soil. Under soil, you need to know the characteristics of different types of soil. You need to know characteristics of loamy soil, characteristics of clayey soil, characteristics of sandy soil. So these characteristics are very important. You need to know the soil structure. You need to know how porous each of these different types of soil is. You need to know the capillarity of the soil, and you need to know the humus content of this soil. The humus content will tell you which one is better for growth of plants. So moving on to components of soils. Component of soil is basically the inorganic. We have the inorganic matter, the organic matter, the soil organisms, the soil oxygen or the soil air, we have soil water. So these components are very, very important. And how do you calculate, let's say, the amount of water present in soil? How do you calculate the, let's say, the microbial load in a particular soil sample? So these things are very, very important in the topic soil. Another subtopic we have is what we call the soil fertility. So in under soil fertility, we need to know what soil fertility is. How does soil lose its fertility? And if soil has lost its fertility, how do you renew the soil fertility? And how do you maintain the soil fertility? So these are very, very important things, important topics that you should know under the bigger branch, soil. So moving on to the next one, we have the 8th most repeated topic, which is ecology of population. Ecology of population tells us the interaction of organisms with its ecosystem. Under this, you have to look at what is called population density and overcrowding. You need to look at population density and overcrowding. What you need to note again is adaptation for survival. What are the factors that bring about competition? Intraspecific and interspecific competition, relationship between competition and different organisms. So it's very important that for you to know how these organisms survive in their ecosystem. What are the adaptations? What are the things that they have to do when condition is not favorable or when there's limited resource? What are the things that these organisms are supposed to do? So moving on from these, we're going to be looking at another important subtopic under ecology of population, and this is factors affecting population sizes. An important factor, there are two important factors that affect population sizes. We have biotic and abiotic factor. When you hear bios, that's life, abiotic, not necessarily relating to life. In terms of biotic factors, we have pests, we have diseases, we have predation. In terms of abiotic factor, we have temperature, we have light, we have rainfall, we have topography, we have pressure, and what have you. Another important subtopic for you to note under ecology of population is ecological succession. Ecological succession, we have primary succession and secondary succession. How is a climax community attained? How do you get a stable community? How do an unstable community transition from being unstable to being stable? The 7th most repeated topic in biology UTME is symbiotic interactions of plants and animals. These look at the interaction that occurs between plants and animals and other organisms, or between themselves. How, let's say, kingdom Monera interacts with kingdom Animalia, or how kingdom Animalia interacts with kingdom Monera, how they interact amongst themselves. So it is very important for you to know these. We have different forms of relationship, different forms of interaction, from parasitism to commensalism to amensalism. There are different forms of interaction, and it's very important for you to know interaction among organisms. Next you should note is energy flow in ecosystem. Looking at food chain, looking at food web, looking at different trophic level. How organisms, how producers carry food from the sun, how producers produce food, and how herbivores eat the producers, and how predators feed on these herbivores. So these things are very, very important in energy flow in the ecosystem. Next, we're going to be looking at under symbiotic interactions of plants and animal is nutrient cycling in nature. It's very important for us to know the carbon cycle, the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, how these elements is being recycled, is being renewed, is continually used up and regenerated in nature, in the ecosystem. The sixth most repeated topic in biology UTME is coordination and control. Coordination and control looks at how organisms coordinate themselves and how they control their actions. We are going to be looking at subtopic nervous coordination, the component of the nervous system, the structure, the function of the central nervous system is very, very, very important in the topic coordination and control. We also have mechanism of transmission of impulses. We also have reflex actions. We have reflex action. We have conditioned reflexes. These are things that you should note very, 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 very importantly. These are things that you should note that you might find in your biology UTME, because this is like the sixth most repeated topic in biology UTME. Moving from nervous coordination, we have other things like sense organs, the skin, the nose, the tongue, the eye, the ears. These sense organs are very important. You need to know the structures of this sense organ and how messages are transferred from the sense organs to the brain. So this is very, very important. Another thing you should note is hormonal control. You need to know animal hormonal system, and you need to know plant hormonal system. You need to note in animal hormonal system, you need to know the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid gland, the adrenal gland. You need to know the pancreas. You need to know the gonads. These are very, very important things you need to know under coordination and control. You need to also know plant hormonal system. You need to know your phytohormones. You need to know your auxins. You need to know your gibberellins. You need to know your ethylene oxide. All these things are very, very important. The last important topic under coordination and control we have here is homeostasis. This is regulating the internal environment of the body. This is regulating the internal environment. You need to know the body temperature regulation. You need to know how water and salt is being regulated, how the body tries to strike a balance between the body, how an organism tries to strike a balance between its body and the outside environment. I hope we are taking notes of these important topics, of these repeated topics in biology UTME. The fifth most repeated topic in biology UTME is heredity. This looks at the transfer of traits from parents to offspring. What is very important here is inheritance. Inheritance of characters in organisms. You need to know inheritable characters and characters that are non-inheritable. You need to also look at chromosomes. You need to know the structure of chromosomes, which you need to know the process of transmission of hereditary characters from parents to offspring. Another very, 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 very important. You see how I'm stressing the importance of this one we are going to look at now. It is really, really important because it has a lot of calculations involved in it, which is probability in genetics and sex determination. It's very important for you to know if a man is heterozygous and he marries a homozygous recessive woman, what is the probability that their offspring will be heterozygous or homozygous dominant? Do you understand what I'm saying? It's very important for you to know the probability in genetics and how sex is being determined. Another important subtopic under the topic heredity is application of the principles of heredity. You have to look at the application of the principles of heredity in agriculture and in medicine. How the principle of heredity can be used to solve problems, can be used to modify our crops in agriculture, or can be used to dictate the transfer of diseases So it's very important for us to know the application of the principles of heredity in agriculture and medicine. And lastly, under the topic heredity, we are going to be looking at sex-linked character. Sex-linked character. These are characters that is associated with the X chromosome. Which are associated with what? The X chromosome. Example of such, we have baldness, we have hemophilia, we have color blindness, and lots more. So moving on to the next important topic, the most repeated topics in biology UTME. So the fourth most repeated topic in biology UTME is reproduction. Reproduction is giving rise to young ones. This ensure the continuity of life. And under reproduction, is important for us to know asexual reproduction. This does not involve any form of fusion of gametes. Example of asexual reproduction, we have binary fission that occurs in protists. We have budding that occurs in yeast and hydra. We have natural vegetative propagation. We have artificial vegetative propagation. And we also need to look at sexual reproduction. We need to look at sexual reproduction in both plants and in animals. You need to know the floral parts and their function. That's the floral part of plants and the function. Pollination and fertilization, the product of sexual reproduction. So we need to look at reproduction also in animals. You need to look at this. You need to know, very importantly, the structure of male and female reproductive organs. You need to look at fertilization and development. You need to look at, now when we're talking about asexual reproduction, we looked at fission, binary fission, that is splitting. If you hear fission, it means splitting. But in sexual reproduction, it involves fusion, the coming together of two different gametes to form a new organism. I hope we are enjoying this particular video series. Looking at the third most repeated topic in biology UTME, we have transport. This transport here involves the transfer of materials even within an organism and outside an organism. You need to know the need for transportation. Why is transportation important in organisms? You need to know the materials for transportation. You need to know what are the materials that needs to be transported. Example of such materials might include excretory products, gases, food that have been manufactured. When I talk about manufacturing food, you should note that only plants manufacture their food. So this, now I'm talking about plants. You need to talk about digested food. You need to talk about nutrients, the transfer of nutrients, or the transportation of nutrients, transportation of water, and transportation of what? Hormones. The next important subtopic under the topic transport is channels for transportation. Channel for transportation, here we're looking at circulatory system, very important in circulatory system in animals. You need to look at plant vascular system. Example of the tissues that are involved in plant vascular system, we have phloem and xylem. So these are very, very important channels for transportation. Apart from the channels for transportation, we look at media and processes of mechanism for transportation. Under this media, we're supposed to look at cytoplasm, cell sap, body fluid, the blood, and lymph. These are very, very important media. Each of very, very important media for transportation. Another one we need to look at that this mechanism of transportation. What are the mechanisms? What are the process mechanisms for transportation? Some of these include diffusion, osmosis, plasmolysis, turgidity. We look at hemolysis. So these are important mechanisms involved in transportation. Now, I hope it's getting excited. We're going to be looking at the second most repeated topic in biology UTME, and this we have nutrition. Nutrition is the process by which an organism tends to what? Look for food, the ability to feed, and the process of feeding or the process of looking for food is just so that this organism can have energy for its life process. Under nutrition, we have modes of nutrition. We have autotrophic nutrition done by plants. We have heterotrophic nutrition done by any organism that is not a plant. We also have chemosynthesis. We have saprophytic mode of nutrition. So these modes of nutrition are very, 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 very important. We need to look at types of nutrition. We have holozoic nutrition and we have holophytic. Holozoic is carried out mainly by animals and holophytic is carried out mainly by plants. So we need to know plant nutrition. How does plant acquire its food? And that is basically by photosynthesis. Now, the mineral requirements for plants to actually grow well. What are the mineral requirements? What are the specific things that plants, the specific macronutrients and micronutrients that plants actually look for? You need to know animal nutrition. Under animal nutrition is a very, 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 very broad one on its own. And look at classes of food substances. We have carbohydrates, protein, and the rest classes of food. And apart from that, we look at food tests. We look at food tests. We look at Biret tests. We look at the Biret test. We look at Sudan tests. Different tests of food: tests for starch, tests for reducing sugar, tests for protein, tests for fat. We look at mammalian tooth. The mammalian tooth. Look at the structure, the types, and the function of the tooth. We look at alimentary canals of animals. Look at nutrition processes, which involves ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation of digested food. So these are very, 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 very important subtopics under the topic nutrition. And now, the last and the most repeated, I said the last and the most repeated topic in biology UTME is evolution among life forms. Basically, here, this is like, even if you open your textbook, this is like the first part of your textbook. When you're reading biology, when you're looking at biology, this is like the first thing you have to meet, because once you have known these, getting to understand getting to know biology will be very, 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 very easy for you, because once you have known the 5 kingdoms of life: kingdom Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Once you have known these 5 kingdoms, and once you know how the unique features of each of the 5 kingdoms, how organism transition from Monera to Animalia, how it's transition from being a diploplastic organism to a triproplastic organism, how this organism transition is very, very important. So we are supposed to look at kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Fungi, kingdom Plantae, and kingdom Animalia. You need to know each of the phylum, you need to know each of the class, you need to know each of the order, and you need to know as many species as possible, and as many genus and as many species as possible. So I hope we enjoyed that one. Here is a summary of the most repeated topics in biology UTME. So the next video, we are going to be tackling questions in the most repeated topics in biology UTME. We are going to be looking from evolution among life forms to nutrition, transport, reproduction, heredity, coordination and control, symbiotic interactions of plants and animals, the ecology of population, soil, humans, and environment. So these are very, very important topics that we are going to be looking at. We're going to be solving specific questions. We're going to be solving 20 questions in the next continue our next video series. We're going to be solving 20 questions under these repeated topics. So see you in the next video. I hope you really enjoyed it. So let's just prepare our minds. Yeah, we have to prepare our minds for the next video. And moving on to the next video, as I'm going to be attempting the question, as I'm going to be solving questions for you, I would like you to calm down and pause your video before attempting the question, because this tells you that, okay, I know this, I don't know this. So if you pause the video, attempt it, and say, oh, I got it, I didn't get it, it's very, very important for you to know these.